And now reading from the book of John, chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, this is his mother, "Woman, what concern is that to you and me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars from the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So we continue our conversation around values. I feel like today we should be talking about lightweight and low maintenance. But alas, today I want us to spend time discussing around this value. There's always room at the table. It's described or defined further by this. We, Storyline, are a hospitable people, welcoming everyone into our community. So I want to begin this morning inviting us into 2 imaginative exercises. And so I'm going to invite you in a moment to close your eyes and imagine what a table like this might look like, a table where there is always room. When you envision a table that has room, who's sitting there? What do the people look like? What does the table look like? What is distinctive about the room that the table sits in, right? There's no right or wrong answer here. We're going to use our imaginations to imagine what this might be like. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, take a few deep breaths and center yourself. And when you hear the phrase, "there's always room at the table," what image comes to mind? What does the room look like? What does the table look like? Who is seated at that table? What are the sounds and the smells and the tastes that are there? I'll give you a few minutes to imagine that scenario. Okay, when you're ready, I want to invite you to open your eyes, come back to the room. I'm curious if a few people would be willing to share what they saw, what their imagination sort of led them to.
Okay. So we grew up with a round table, and one of the things I love about round tables is that you can always add more people in. So just like this picture of a round table. And then there's this one video I saw on YouTube of this like expandable round table. So like you like turn it and it like makes it so that it makes it bigger. So then I was thinking about like a table, you could do that and you could add more people and then you could do it again and then you could have more people and you could do it again. You could add more people. But I love the idea of a round table. You still get to see everybody and it was not like a head or a foot of the table. You just like, you're all there. And so that was the first thing.
That's great. Thanks.
She stole mine. I love the idea of the round table. This one is very difficult for me. I see people I hate there.
Hmm.
And I don't mean people
Hmm.
that generally society dislikes. I'm talking about people I hate
Hmm.
there. People who need my forgiveness, who I refuse to give it to.
Hmm.
I see Russian Federation soldiers who mutilate and kill people, who kill people I care about in Ukraine. I see people who are politically very unkind toward other people. I see people that have wounded me personally. And yet that's, I guess, what we are all called to, even though I don't want to be called to that. So I just like, you want to pray, Lord, help me want to be that way, because I'm not there yet.
Thanks, Sarah. Anyone else want to share? So why am I passing it around? You guys can pass it around yourselves.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that's right. All are welcome to pass your own mic.
Okay, so there was a round table too in my imagination. But the round table wasn't in like a churchy space. It was in like kind of a darker lit space, like maybe it was a bar, but we cleared out the little tiny tables so that we could have our big round tables. And there was people who weren't like wearing church clothes, you know. There was people who wore whatever they wanted to wear, or just people that were different than me, but also the same. And it was people that I feel like church people in general might be uncomfortable with. But we were laughing and, sharing food and drink. And there was just a lot of welcome.
That's great.
I can't help but think of the Gospel of Brandy Carlisle and her song Crowded Table, and just this feeling. There is like a sense of relief, or like we've all been out working hard or doing different things, and then there's just this sense of like we're tired and weary, but we're so happy to be together around this table. Like it's good to be back home and be back together. And it just feels like a relief.
It's great. It's truly. Okay. Second imaginative exercise. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes again and identify and reflect a moment in your life where you have felt truly welcomed. And I want, as best you can, to think of a particular situation, not just a season of life, but a context that it actually happened in. What were the dynamics at play? What was happening within you? What were the circumstances surrounding it? So I want you to try to identify, mine your own life, in your history, in your experience, and identify a moment when you felt truly welcomed. Okay? I invite you again to close your eyes, take a few deep breaths. Spend the next few moments identifying a moment when you felt welcomed. Who was involved? What were the dynamics at play, both within yourself and in the context and circumstances surrounding it? So take a few moments to think of a moment you felt welcomed. Okay, when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back to the room. Curious if anyone's willing to share. All are welcome. No one is required.
There we go. So this was an interesting one for me because I think my personality is such that I'm way more comfortable offering the welcome than receiving the welcome. There's a desire for control in that of I would rather come from a place of abundance and offer something than come from a place of deficit and need to receive. And so it's hard for me to enter that space of vulnerability. And this is I haven't thought about this memory in years. And so it's funny that it came bubbling up today, but in December of, 2009, we were moving from Abilene to Dallas and had packed up the U-Haul and we're about to head out. It was like 70 degrees as we were loading it up. I was in shorts and sweating. And overnight, the cold front came through and it snowed. An unbelievable, I don't even remember it was like the most snow we've ever gotten. It was Christmas Eve. The most snow we've ever gotten on Christmas Eve. And so we made it to, I think, Ranger, Texas. That's right, because we couldn't make it down. So I drove this U-Haul. I had my wife, Val, had a separate car. My sister was actually traveling with us and my mom. We were in 4 different cars, spread out. You know, this was 2009, so even like cell signal wasn't even what it is today, and we couldn't connect. And it took us like, I think 7 hours to make it to Ranger, which is like an hour drive.
You know, Ranger Hill,
maybe
big hill going up.
Yeah,
that's right.
I mean, multiple times we were slip sliding over the highway and doubling back, and this road got closed and they detoured us around somewhere else. I mean, it was, if we had known, we would have just stayed another couple days in Abilene. Right. But then we're out in the middle of it, you know, and so it's just as bad behind you as to go forward. And so, you know, just this, I remember we finally got we pulled off the road and there was a Dairy Queen there and we parked behind it. And I remember the U-Haul that I was driving with all my worldly possessions in it skidded to a stop and just went into a snowbank. And I thought, well, I'm leaving that there for a while. And long story short, through some people at the Dairy Queen, we found our way over to I think it was the First Baptist Church of Ranger or somewhere back in there. And on a table much like this one, people from the town had come and just brought, I think there was hot cocoa and coffee and just some snacks. There was an invitation to use the outlets on the wall to charge your phone or to lay down on a pew for a little while if you needed to. And, you know, it was one of those small towns in West Texas that I probably don't think about a lot. And if I really search myself, might have certain stereotypes of the people that live there. And so to find myself, you know, vulnerable and needing that hospitality and just getting to sit down at a folding table with a styrofoam cup of hot chocolate and some snacks, that was welcome in that moment.
Thanks, Miles. Well, being the Christ figure in the situation, as always.
Honestly, I think it was here about like 9 years ago, especially when we had our women's discipleship group. And I was kind of talk about things in ways and just kind of y'all sat with me in that place and I needed that. And that was very, very welcoming to me because I did not feel welcomed at the church we had come from because questions were not welcome and thinking about those things were not welcome. And I could hear with y'all, especially in that space. And so that was really,
Mm,
really important to me.
Thanks, Megan. Daryl?
Okay, I think we need 3 microphones just spread around. For me, Megan, for me, it happens to be a portrait of Kramer with a
Huh.
with a Christmas Santa hat on, and a big table that's set up in a living room of your and Ted's home.
Yeah.
That when we first started being here and being at your house for all those times that our missional community gathered, that y'all would treat such old folks like us with kindness. We really love that. And that was what first
Great.
popped into my mind.
Great. Thanks, Daryl.
Mine is probably, we had not seen our older child 2.5 years, I guess,
Mm.
since she has an autoimmune disease and could not come home for Christmas due to COVID. And our son-in-law, Pete, we got with him and surprised our oldest child for her birthday, her 34th birthday. And his parents were so gracious that they set up tables in their backyard. And
Mm.
our child did not know we were coming. And his mom is from Norway and cooked these Swedish or whatever pancakes or whatever, fixed a whole big old spread for all of us to come to their home and sit and have breakfast together and get to visit with our oldest child. And so that's mine.
That's great.
That was last year in July.
Thanks, Terry.
Yeah. Oh, for sure, for sure. I was thinking back to my childhood. We had a very small family. My dad was an only child and his parents were gone. And my mom had one sibling and her parents lived across the country, like off the coast of Canada. And so when it was holiday time, we were with friends every Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, anything like that. And it just never crossed my mind as a child that I don't know that was, I don't know that it was unusual per se, but that wasn't what everybody did, and I mean, and I remember those people having their family there, but it just never felt like we were imposing, or so I just have this embedded sense of the holidays as a very big welcoming experience that you can include anybody in. And and I just don't ever remember it being a thing of I guess we'll stay home and hopefully someone will invite us. It just was this just immediate warm, well, obviously you guys are coming, or, I don't know. And just now that I'm an adult, I'm oh man, friends can be more like family sometimes, even than family. And just, I see pictures now of those people who are my parents' friends on social media and they look so old, but I look at them and it just immediately, I feel those feelings again of oh my gosh, these people raised me and were so welcoming. And I know where they kept their cups and, just really sweet memories that I think when you embed that in someone at a young age, it just sticks with you of oh, this is what it feels like to be welcomed into someone's family.
Thanks, Julie.
So mine is also here at Storyline. When we first came to Storyline, we were in the middle of crisis, having left another church. As I was figuring out my sexuality, and I just remember being intentional about telling my story, and for you guys to know about me, so that if it wasn't going to work out here, I could
prepare myself. And I've just been so thankful that I just get to be me, and I don't have to pretend or, just hide myself. So
I feel very deeply grateful and privileged, knowing that I've felt and continue to feel welcome in ways that a lot of people don't have the opportunity. I mean, Jen just shared this community in this space, welcoming us out of our own church and religious trauma. I have a group of friends, went to grad school together, and every year since 2007, the four of us get together. We call it Brobatical. Barely won over Manfest. And we have a rhythm. We typically 4 days, 3 nights, and each of us takes a morning or an afternoon to sort of share where we've been the last year. And it's the thing that's distinctive to me, and sort of this notion of hospitality and welcome, is I don't ever feel the need that they're going to try to fix me. That I could be my honest, fullest self, which Jen will tell you isn't always pretty, and they're not frightened by it. I don't feel judged by it or shamed from it. And it is, and I'm fortunate to have spaces like that in a number of different areas in my life. Dr. Christine Pohl, who is a Christian ethicist at Asbury, wrote arguably the seminal work on hospitality in the Christian tradition. It's called Making Room, Recovering the Ancient Practice of Christian Hospitality. It's older, it's 1999, but it remains like the book that everyone goes to. And in it, she tries to sort of detangle the contemporary notions of hospitality that we've acquired and recapture what she sees in both the Hebrew scriptures and in the Christian tradition. And that is, hospitality is something different than our contemporary notion of the hospitality industry and hotels, where there is almost always a host and a guest, someone who's providing and someone who's receiving. Instead, Dr. Pohl argues that hospitality is always a two-way street, where in the space that's gathered, everyone gives, everyone receives. And she goes to biblical texts that point this out. One of the ones that folks often point to is Genesis 18, when 3 strangers come to Abraham and Sarah, and she points out that they both give and they both receive. The angels, that ends up to be God, receive the hospitality of Abraham as he and Sarah provide food and shelter. And Abraham and Sarah receive the news that they're going to have children. And so she walks through all of scripture to point it out. The ways in which hospitality is the space where people can be fully themselves, which she draws from Henry Nouwen, and where everyone gives and everyone receives, where it becomes difficult to see who is actually the host and who is the guest. I think I've shared this story before in this space, but Jen and I had good friends in a previous life, and the wife had this deep sense that she had the gift of hospitality. And it was true whenever you were there with them. Your cup was always full, your plate was always full. But over time, we discovered she was very, very anxious. And so you couldn't actually sort of speak openly and honestly. Otherwise, conflict would come up and she would kind of shut it down. Even came to the point where there was the tension was happening between us, as I was pastor of the church we were part of, and they didn't like some of the direction the church was going. And so they're really upset about it. And Jen and her were best friends. And essentially, she told Jen, like, we could talk about anything but church. That's off the table. And Jen was like, nope, that's not how I do friendship. Like, I can't do that. Paul, when she talks about hospitality, she not only researches it historically, but she also does practical research. So she works with communities that are seeking out to be welcoming. And one of the things she noticed is that communities that are best at welcoming others know who they are, so they have a clear sense of their identity and what they have to offer, who they are in the world, a sense of mission. And she also says that communities that are best at welcoming others commit to a few things. The first thing is promise making and promise keeping. And the second thing is truth telling. That communities that are welcome are trustworthy communities. And the only way to build trust, or one of the two primary ways you build trust, is by making promises and keeping those promises and telling the truth to one another. She says, we build trust by being true to our word, by holding on to one another, and by staying at the table long enough to understand the differences. So I'm curious, what do you think about this? This is a more difficult question, but what's your response to this notion of hospitality or being a welcoming community, being connected to this notion of promise making, promise keeping, and truth telling? What do you notice about those connections? Yeah, so Paul points to promise making and promise keeping and truth telling as two important pursuits for communities that want to be welcoming. And so the question is, what do you think about this connection between those things and what it means to be a welcoming community and hospitality? Maybe we can think of times where we've experienced that, where someone has made a promise and kept it, and it's built a trustworthy kind of community. Or we've been in a part of a community that's told the truth, and we've experienced the welcome in that. So I'm just curious how you see this connection, how you've experienced it, or questions or thoughts about it. Of my questions that I put together today, that was the one I was like, I don't know if this is very good. We'll see how it goes.
So I kind of feel like truth telling might be essentially promise making and promise keeping. Right. That I don't know. Like I promise to be fully who I know myself to be, and to present that fully to the people that I'm sharing life with. And I'm going to keep that promise by, continuing to say what I really feel or what I really think.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. And so clear expectations, feel welcoming.
So I don't like this question.
Great. I told you it wasn't very good, so we can move on.
And I don't like it because it's challenging to me. This is for those of you that like the Enneagram, this is a very Enneagram 3 thing, and I've had to sit with this for a long time. Of one of the most authentic expressions of myself is a desire to match other people's energy to come alongside them to hear their story. To achieve that is very meaningful to me. That's the healthy version. The unhealthy version is a fear of truth telling for fear of disrupting the relationship, and being inauthentic to myself within that, and not realizing that I'm doing that. So being truthful in that sense is actually like hard for me, even to be self-aware that I'm not being truthful. So this bridge of connection between promise making and promise keeping and truth telling is one that I'm still exploring.
Thanks, Miles. Right there.
It's just right there. The bridge, good job.
It's a bridge.
It reminds me of the beginning of John when they talk about that Jesus was full of grace and truth. And I think of that phrase, grace and truth, and how we so often focus on the grace or focus on the truth. And the combination of those two, the balance between those two. And I think there's still in kind of what you were saying as well, the truth telling and the promise keeping, the balance of those, that there's something there. So.
Mr. Walker.
This is really left field, but as I keep thinking of this meme that I saw on Facebook that was like, introductions are important. You should, state who you are, what's relevant, and set expectations. And the example is, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. And
That's great.
like, it does feel like welcoming in a sense. It's like, we're here. We're going to do, like that scene. Like there's comfort found in that. I don't know. So
Yeah,
I just keep thinking of that. And
that's great. Yeah.
And then I just recently watched the Banshees of Inisherin. Has anyone seen that?
Oh, brilliant.
And so like at the
So
end,
weird.
like it, like there's try not to spoil things, but like, there's like this feud. But then at the end, it's like, thanks for taking care of my dog. And he's like, oh, ask me anytime, and it's like,
Yeah.
so.
Thanks, Ryan. So that the Inigo Montoya is actually a really helpful transition to my next point, because Paul talks about there are limitations to hospitality. There are limitations to welcome. And one of those is that communities can't be everything to everybody. And so having a clear sense of the promises that you're going to make and staying true to those means there's some promises you can't make and shouldn't make. There's also, Charles isn't here, so, or the other lead person, Ted, but it makes me wonder, like, welcoming everyone into our community is neither possible or healthy, right? For example, one of the limitations, how is a community supposed to welcome someone who has been abused and at the same time welcome their abuser? I know of a church who, like us, has this posture, this value of welcoming everybody. And recently, where you have someone who experienced sexual harassment and abuse, and the abuser, and they're like, we want to find space for both of you to be here. It is, and others will agree, research points to it, it's the abuser who gets the space, because the victim is far more likely to say, I can't be in this space, even if forgiveness has happened, right? There's a limitation there. If a community has a clear sense of their identity, how might they welcome someone whose behavior violates that very identity? How does a community that is committed to telling the truth continue to stay welcoming to someone who does not, particularly when that dishonesty is harmful? So it feels a little bit odd for me to talk about we are a hospitable people. There's always room at the table. Everyone is welcome, while I'm also saying there are limitations to that. So I'm curious, what do you think about this tension? How have you experienced it? Do you agree with Paul? And I guess the argument I'm making, are there limitations to being a welcoming community? What are your thoughts, reflections on that? Julie has something to say quickly.
Like, I just look at the life of Jesus. I'm like, well, Jesus wouldn't turn anyone away. Then I really start thinking about it. And I'm like, No, like Jesus let the rich young ruler walk away. Like he was like, this is what I'm about. This is what it means to follow me. And like, this might not be the place for you. And like, I'm not going to try to find a space for you. Like, this is where I'm going. Like, you know, and let him walk away. And I just think, it is very tempting, I think, I don't know if it's our culture or our locations to be like, we want to have something for everybody, or we want to, like, I want to please everybody with what we're doing. And like, we can be about that so that people who are about that can come, but not so much about that, that people who aren't about that are like, you're so about that. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm following. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And it's just hard. Like, I think you have to say, like, there's some people we're going to say, this is who we are and this is where we're going, and let them walk away and wish them well. Like that's, I mean, obviously the rich young ruler needed to get his affairs in order, but not
Yeah.
that's where the analogy ends.
Thanks, Julie.
Yeah, along with that, like Jesus is way more with the vibes of the outcast and making friends with the people who are like, don't talk to them or don't,
Yeah.
unclean. And yeah, like he really wasn't welcoming to the hoity-toity church people who just felt like they knew the right things.
Mhm. Darrell.
Is that okay? I think part of it too is that you can offer, but as in the case of rich young ruler and what you're mentioning, Jen, too, is that you can offer, that doesn't mean it will be accepted. People will look at our identity and say, I want nothing to do with that identity. And that's where you don't go chasing after that. You don't go, hey, please come back, please come back. No, you can't do that. You can't do that with everyone. But I do think there has to be some sort of posture of love and grace, regardless. But yes, if you have someone coming in that's actually destroying what you are and who you are, even Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians 3, that anyone who destroys the temple of God, which all of us form together, then God will destroy that person. And however you want to interpret that, a person that would destroy the community. They have to be allowed not to be there, I think. So it's a tough call.
Yep. Thanks, Darrell.
So like we like to say, like Jesus became all things to all people so they could, win some, but you can't be all things to all people at the same time, right?
Right.
When you're like moving cross-culturally or counterculturally to engage with people or different cultures or whatever, right? Like you're actually shifting somewhat what you're about to highlight specific aspects of what you're about, right?
Yeah.
But you can't like one metaphor would be like, you can't learn another language to speak it to someone and not like be changed yourself, right? And it's actually impossible to maintain your mother tongue while you're doing that. Like you lose vocabulary whether you want to or not. So
thanks, Ryan. Miles, did you raise your hand or no?
I was.
Let me see. I'll give you a minute. Wait. And go.
And again. I will keep it brief. I was just kind of laughing to myself a little bit when you said, and now let me give a list of the people that we shouldn't give welcome to at the table.
Right.
The ways the church has answered that question over the centuries has not always covered ourselves in glory in that. And so that is a tricky question, and one that requires wisdom and insight. And I certainly don't have the answer of how that should be done. But I was thinking, I think you shared with us, Ben, before the phrase, do the next thing that love requires as a guiding light for a church. And for various reasons, when I was listening to the message from last week that we missed while we were out of town, that phrase has been bubbling up in my mind. And I would offer that up as one way to try to get that question as right as possible.
Yeah. I think St. Francis said that, or Augustine.
I was going to say
Somebody who's dead said that. Or Ben, I mean, I was hoping, but I don't know why I keep expecting different things when this happens every time, to do a few things, but I'm going to truncate it. I was going to invite us to return to Psalm 146 and ask the question, what do we learn about being a welcoming community from how the psalmist depicts who God is? God is the bringer of justice to the oppressed, bringer of bread to the hungry, the one who sets prisoners free, opens eyes of the blind, lifts up those who are bowed down. Righteous God loves the righteous, loves the stranger, orphan, and widow. So as we understand and look to who God is, how might that inform the kind of table that we embody? How might we, in the spirit of we can't be everything to all people at the same time, how do we embody, in some ways, prioritize the kind of community we want to be, and understand our identity in the midst of that? John 2, it is striking to me. This is one of my big pushes always for reframing hospitality, particularly in the church, which historically the American church likes to do things on our terms and our turf, right? We want people to come to us. What it looks like to receive the hospitality of others on their terms and their turf. And that to be a welcoming community isn't just because we have something to offer them. We have something to receive. It gets striking to me that Jesus is the guest and he's the one who brings the wine to the party. That to be a welcoming community, to be hospitable, is founded in this belief that we're missing out when we can't welcome the stranger, that we are actually robbing ourselves of the opportunity to have a pretty good party with great wine when we don't create space where all are welcome. Let me pray. God, we give thanks with full hearts for the table that you have opened up before us, for receiving us in all the ways that we do and don't deserve it. We give you thanks. And we are mindful of the difficulty of this pursuit, both the ways that it challenges us to welcome those that might be hard for us to welcome, and to understand who we are and the ways that that might conflict with people's desire or ability to be a part of your community here. God, we don't know how to do it. We do not have the answers, but we trust that in love and in your mercy, we might fumble our way to continue to be the community you want us to be. So give us eyes to see and ears to hear and the gift of open hearts. Help us always pursue the value of making room, that there is always room at this table, first and foremost, because it does not belong to us, it belongs to you. Through Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever, world without end. Amen.